The Valoran collective had watched the stars for a very long time. They had found over 12,000 intelligent species across the galaxy. They had seen great empires rise and fall. They had watched young civilizations take their first steps into space, and they had seen old ones fade into dust. Nothing surprised them anymore, or so they thought, when their sensors picked up radio signals from a small yellow star on the edge of the galaxy. They expected to find another primitive species. Perhaps some simple creatures just learning to use technology. Perhaps a quiet world with peaceful beings who would join the Galactic Union without any trouble. What they found was Earth. Ambassador Kethril was chosen to make first contact. He was old and wise, with 4 eyes that had seen 1,000 worlds. He had welcomed dozens of species into the Union. He knew how to speak to newcomers, how to calm their fears, how to explain the wonders of galactic civilization. But Earth confused him. He arrived, expecting to meet with a single planetary government. Instead, he found 200 separate nations. He expected peace. Instead, he found 18 active wars happening at the same time. He expected a species that had moved beyond violence. Instead, he found humans. They fight each other constantly, Kethril reported to the council. They have weapons that can destroy entire cities. They have built enough of these weapons to burn their whole world several times over. And yet they have not done so. They stand at the edge of destruction and somehow choose to step back, again and again. The council members murmured among themselves. This was unusual. Most species either achieved peace or destroyed themselves. Humans seem to exist in a strange middle ground. What should we do with them? Asked High Counselor Vestan. We cannot ignore them, Kethril said. They breed quickly and learn faster than any species I have encountered. If we leave them alone, they will reach the stars within a century, and when they do, they will remember that we knew about them and did nothing. The council debated for 3 days. In the end, they decided to offer humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Union. They would share some technology, establish trade, and most importantly, keep a close watch on these strange, violent creatures. Captain Danny Vance was 34 years old when he became the first human to board an alien vessel. He had spent 12 years in the military, serving in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. He had seen combat. He had lost friends. He had learned that the universe was not a kind place. Now he walked through the halls of a Valoran ship, surrounded by beings that looked like nothing he had ever imagined. The Valorans were tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They moved with careful grace, as if afraid of breaking something. They looked at Danny like he was a bomb that might explode at any moment. Your species maintains professional soldiers, Ambassador Kethril said as they walked. Beings whose only job is to fight and kill. This is very rare among Union members. You don't have armies? Danny asked. We have peacekeepers, guards for ceremonies. But warriors who train their whole lives for combat? The ambassador's eyes blinked one after another. Most species gave this up long ago. It was considered uncivilized. Danny nodded slowly. He did not argue. He simply remembered everything and put it in his report to Earth Command. The next 5 years changed everything. Humanity had been given a gift of alien technology as part of their Union membership. The Valorans expected them to study it for decades, slowly learning its secrets. They thought it would be 100 years before humans could build their own starships. They were wrong. Human scientists worked day and night. They took the alien technology apart piece by piece. They figured out how it worked, and then they made it better. Within 5 years, the first human-built starship launched from Earth orbit. They called it the Times Resolute Asterisk. The Valoran engineers who had helped with the project were shocked. The ship was not just a copy of their designs. It was something new. Something faster and stronger and more efficient than anything they had built. How did they do this? One engineer demanded. We gave them basic schematics. They should not have been able to improve upon them so quickly. The answer was simple, though the aliens did not understand it. Humans had spent their entire history improving things. They had taken the wheel and turned it into the car. They had taken fire and turned it into the rocket. They had taken simple stones and turned them into computers that fit in their pockets. Give a human a tool, and they will find a way to make it better. This was their nature. News of the times, resolute times, spread through the Galactic Union. Species that had never heard of Earth began asking questions. Who were these newcomers? How had they advanced so quickly? And most importantly, were they dangerous? Ambassador Kethral was asked to provide an assessment. He thought for a long time before answering. Humans are not like us, he said finally. They come from a world that tried to kill them. Their planet is covered in predators, poisons, and disasters. They evolved not as masters of their world, but as survivors. Every step of their progress was paid for in blood. He paused, his 4 eyes distant. They have a word in their language, soldier. It means one who fights for pay. But they have another word that means something more. Warrior. One who fights because it is their nature. One who finds purpose in battle. He looked at the council. We thought we were welcoming a young species into our family. We thought we could teach them peace. And now? Asked the High Counselor. Now I think we have invited wolves to live among sheep. They wear our clothes, and speak our words, and follow our laws. But beneath it all, they are still wolves. Kethral's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And I fear that one day, the galaxy will need wolves. I fear that day very much. I fear that day very much. Far away, on the bridge of the Times, resolute asterisk, Captain Danny Vance looked out at the stars. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations, humans and the occasional alien advisor working side by side. They did not know what was coming. None of them did. The threats that lurked in the dark spaces between stars, the ancient enemies that had been sleeping for millennia, the horrors that would soon wake and turn their hungry eyes toward the light. But when those threats came, humanity would be ready. They had been getting ready for a very long time. The Krix had been killing for 10,000 years. They were insects, but not like any insects Earth had ever known. Each one stood as tall as a man, with black shells and claws that could cut through metal. They did not think as individuals. They shared one mind, one hunger, one terrible purpose. They ate worlds. When the Krix found a planet with life, they descended upon it like a swarm of locusts. They stripped it bare of every resource, every plant, every creature. They used what they took to make more of themselves, and then they moved on to the next world. The Galactic Union had fought them centuries ago. The war had been long and bloody, but eventually they pushed the Krix back. A quarantine zone was established. Both sides agreed to stay on their own side of the line. For 300 years, the peace held. Then the Krix broke through. They came without warning, pouring into the Tyrellian sector with hundreds of hive ships. 3 colony worlds fell in the first week. The Union's peacekeeping forces tried to stop them. But their ships were designed for patrol duties, not war. They were destroyed in minutes. Emergency signals went out across the galaxy. The Council gathered in the Great Chamber on Valora Prime. Representatives from 1,000 species trying to find a solution. Fear hung in the air like smoke. We cannot stop them, said the military advisor, his voice shaking. They have 2 million combat drones. Our forces are scattered. By the time we gather a proper fleet, they will have taken 10 more systems. The chamber erupted in argument. Some called for retreat. Others demanded sacrifice. A few suggested surrender, hoping the Krix might be satisfied with only part of the galaxy. Then the human delegation spoke. Admiral Megan Torres stood up. She was 53 years old, with gray in her hair and steel in her eyes. She had commanded the human fleet for 7 years, ever since humanity had been granted full military status in the Union. We will handle it, she said. The chamber went silent. Translation devices worked overtime, and several delegates asked for the words to be repeated. Surely there had been a mistake. You do not understand, said High Counselor Vethan. The Krix have millions of soldiers. Your species has perhaps 50 starships. This is not a battle you can win. We have 53 ships. Megan corrected. But we will not be sending ships. We will be sending our special forces. More confusion. The aliens did not know what this meant. They assumed it was a translation error, perhaps referring to a special fleet or a new weapon. They approved the mission, grateful that someone was willing to try. 3 weeks later, a single human transport ship entered the Turelian sector. It carried no visible weapons. Its crew list showed 47 people. The Cricks noticed it and decided it was not worth attention. They continued their advance. This was the worst mistake they had ever made. Sergeant Cole Martinez had been a Green Beret for 12 years. He had fought in jungles, deserts, and mountains. He had survived situations that should have killed him many times over. When the call came for volunteers to join the new exoplanetary warfare division, he was first in line. Now he sat in the drop pod, falling through the atmosphere of a conquered world, surrounded by 11 other operators who had trained just as hard as he had. "Listen up," he said through the radio. "The Cricks share one mind. They have command nodes on the surface that coordinate the drones. We take out the nodes, and the drones go crazy. They will turn on each other. And if the intelligence is wrong," asked Corporal Lisa Dunn, "then we adapt and overcome. That is what we do." The pods hit the ground hard, scattering across the countryside. The operators moved quickly, using the darkness and the terrain to hide from Cricks patrols. They had studied the enemy for months. They knew where the command nodes would be. They knew how to kill them. Within 6 hours, the first node was destroyed. Cole led the assault himself. They came in silent, using suppressed weapons that the Cricks had never encountered. The guards died before they knew they were under attack. The node, a living structure that pulsed with the thoughts of the hive mind, was destroyed with carefully placed explosives. Across the planet, the effect was immediate. Drones that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly stopped. Some wandered aimlessly. Others attacked anything that moved, including each other. The humans did not stop. For the next 42 hours, they moved from node to node, destroying each one with brutal efficiency. They did not rest. They did not eat. They had trained for this, pushing their bodies beyond limits that most species thought possible. 3 operators died during the mission. Private Jake Simmons was caught in an ambush. Specialist Maria Reyes sacrificed herself to destroy a heavily defended node. Sergeant Dan Perry took a wound that should have killed him, but kept fighting for 6 more hours before his body finally gave out. Their names were remembered. When the human fleet arrived, led by the carrier times Resolute Asterisk, they expected a hard fight. Instead, they found chaos. The Cricks forces had torn themselves apart. Their hive ships were already retreating. Their coordination shattered. The battle was over before it truly began. Cole Martinez was pulled off the planet by rescue shuttle. He was exhausted, wounded, and covered in the blood of creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. When the shuttle door opened and he saw the crew of the Times, Resolute Times, waiting for him, he simply nodded. "Mission complete," he said. Then he passed out. News of the victory spread fast. The species of the Galactic Union could not believe what had happened. 47 humans had done what their combined forces could not. They had broken the Cricks, sent them running, and saved an entire sector. The Council requested a briefing. They wanted to know everything about these special forces, these warriors who could fight like demons and disappear like ghosts. Admiral Torres provided the information. She explained the training, the selection process, the years of preparation that went into creating a single operator. The aliens listened in horror. "You torture your own people," one delegate said. "You starve them, exhaust them, break them down. We prepare them," Torres replied. "The universe is not kind. Our enemies are not kind. We make our soldiers hard because soft soldiers die." The delegate had no response to this. In the months that followed, the Galactic Union changed its view of humanity. They were no longer seen as dangerous newcomers who might cause trouble. They were seen as something else entirely. They were seen as the species you called when all hope was lost. And somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, other threats began to stir. Ancient things that had been sleeping for ages, now sensing that something new had entered the galaxy. Something that might finally be worth fighting. The wolves had announced themselves. and the galaxy would never be the same. Word of the Tyrellian victory spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species in the Galactic Union heard the story. 47 humans had defeated an army of millions. It seemed impossible, and yet, it had happened. Now everyone wanted to know more. Intelligence agencies from 100 worlds began gathering information on humanity's special forces. They sent spies to Earth. They bribed officials for documents. They studied every piece of footage from the Tyrellian mission. What they found kept them awake at night. Agent Sithra of Valoran Intelligence was tasked with writing the official report. She spent months researching, interviewing human military officials, and watching training exercises. When she finally presented her findings to the council, her hands were shaking. They begin selecting warriors in childhood, she explained. Their educational systems identify those with physical and mental gifts. These individuals are encouraged to join the military. From the general military population, the best are selected for special units. And then, the process truly begins. She showed them footage of something called Hell Week. Human candidates were kept awake for 5 days straight, while being subjected to constant physical exercise. They were cold, wet, exhausted, and pushed until their bodies screamed for rest. 80% of candidates quit during this single week. Those who survive Hell Week are only beginning, Sithra continued. They then face months of additional training. They learn to fight in water, in mountains, in deserts, in jungles. They are taught to kill with weapons and with their bare hands. They learn to survive on almost nothing, to resist torture, to keep fighting when any other being would die. The council watched in silence. On the screen, human soldiers crawled through mud, ran until they collapsed, and were then ordered to run more. They were yelled at, insulted, pushed beyond every limit. "This is barbaric," said Counselor Vethan. "They are destroying their own people. They are destroying their own people." "No," said a voice from the back of the chamber. "They are forging them." The council turned to see the human ambassador walking forward. His name was Ben Harper. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been one of those special operators. He still carried himself with the quiet confidence of a predator. "You do not understand what we are," Ben said, taking his place at the speaking platform. "You see our violence and call us primitive. You see our warriors and call us barbaric. But you are missing the truth." "Then explain it to us," Vethan said. Ben nodded slowly. "Most of your species evolved on peaceful worlds. You were the dominant life forms on your planets. You had few predators, plenty of food, and space to grow. Cooperation came naturally to you. Peace was the logical outcome." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Earth was not like that. Our world tried to kill us every single day. We evolved alongside predators that were faster, stronger, and deadlier than us. Lions, wolves, bears, sharks. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We were small, weak, and fragile. And yet you survived," said Sithra. "We did more than survive. We became the deadliest species our planet had ever known. We did it through cooperation, through tools, and through one thing that no other creature on Earth possessed." Ben tapped his temple. "We could imagine threats before they arrived. We could plan for dangers we had never seen. We could prepare for the worst. Always." He looked around the chamber at the alien faces watching him. "Your species achieved peace and forgot what it meant to be afraid. You stopped preparing for predators because there were none. But we never forgot. Even after we killed or tamed every predator on our world, we kept looking over our shoulders. We kept sharpening our claws." "You are saying that fear made you what you are," Vethan said. "Fear and the refusal to accept it," Ben replied. "Our special forces are the purest expression of this. They are humans who have been pushed to the breaking point and did not break. They are the ones who run toward danger, while every instinct screams at them to run away. They are not soldiers. They are something older, something that existed before civilization, before language, before everything." "What are they?" asked Sithra. Ben smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They are the part of us that refused to die. The part that looked at a universe full of teeth and claws and said, "No. We will not be prey." The council was silent for a long time after that. Far away, on Earth's moon, the exoplanetary warfare division was growing. What had started as a small experimental program was becoming something much larger. New recruits arrived every month, the best warriors humanity had to offer. Lieutenant Katie Reyes stood before her latest class of 50 candidates. They came from every branch of the military, from every nation on Earth. They had already proven themselves as exceptional soldiers. Now they would learn to be something more. "You have all been told you are the best," she said, her voice echoing across the training field. "You have medals and commendations and proud records. Forget all of that. Here, you are nothing. Here, you will be broken down and built back up. Many of you will fail. Most of you will quit." She walked slowly along the line, meeting each candidate's eyes. "But those of you who make it through will be capable of things you cannot imagine. You will learn to fight in environments that would kill ordinary humans in seconds. You will face enemies that your ancestors could not have dreamed of. And you will win, because that is what we do. That is what we have always done." The training began that day. It would last 18 months. Of the 50 candidates who started, only 11 would complete the program. Those 11 would become legends. Back on Valora Prime, the council made a decision. They would not try to create their own special forces. The cost was too high. The process too brutal. Their species had evolved beyond such things. Instead, they would rely on humanity. Trade agreements were signed. Military contracts were established. When a member species faced a threat they could not handle, they would call upon Earth. And Earth would send its wolves. Not every species was happy with this arrangement. Some saw humanity as dangerous, unpredictable, a threat to the established order. They whispered in dark corners, made secret plans, waited for the right moment to strike. They did not realize that the wolves could hear them whispering, and the wolves were always watching. 10 years after first contact, humanity had found its place among the stars. They were not the richest species in the Galactic Union. They were not the oldest or the most advanced. But when trouble came, when threats arose that others could not handle, there was only one call to make. Earth answered that call again and again. Master Sergeant Ryan Cole sat in the briefing room of the carrier Times Defiant Asterisk, studying the holographic display floating before him. It showed a Velaran research station, a spinning wheel of metal and glass hanging in the darkness of space. Inside that station, 42 scientists were being held hostage by the Thornax Syndicate. The Thornax were criminals who operated across 3 sectors of space. They dealt in stolen technology, illegal weapons, and slaves. For 6 weeks, they had been demanding the release of their imprisoned leaders. The Valoran government had tried negotiating. They had offered money and compromises. The Syndicate had responded by executing 3 hostages. Now the Valorans had called the humans. "Rules of engagement?" asked Specialist Danielle Ortega. She was young, only 26, but she had already completed a dozen missions. "Hostiles are free targets," Ryan answered. "No restrictions. But the Valoran scientists must be recovered alive. That is our only constraint." Hiwayenteng. "What about the station itself?" "Expendable. If we have to blow it apart to complete the mission, that is acceptable." He looked around at his team. 12 operators from the 1st Exoplanetary Special Forces Group. Any other questions? There were none. They had all done this before. The insertion was silent and perfect. They used stealth pods, small capsules that were nearly invisible to sensors. The Thornax had guards watching every approach, but they were looking for ships, not objects the size of a human body. Specialist Nick Davis was first through the airlock. He moved in zero gravity like he had been born in space. His movements smooth and controlled. The first guard died without making a sound, a suppressed energy beam burning through his skull. The second guard fell a moment later. Then the third. The team split into 4 groups, each moving toward a different section of the station. They had memorized the layout during the flight, knew every corridor and room by heart. The Thornax had 40 soldiers on the station. They thought they were in control. They were wrong. The rescue took 17 minutes. In that time, 43 syndicate members were killed. The operators moved like ghosts, appearing from shadows, striking without warning, and vanishing before anyone could react. The hostages heard nothing until a human soldier appeared at their cell doors and said, "Come with us. You are safe now." Not a single hostage was lost after the humans arrived. When news of the rescue reached the Thornax leadership, they immediately released all their remaining prisoners across 3 other facilities. They did not wait to be asked. They did not try to negotiate. They understood the message perfectly. But not all of humanity's battles were fought against criminals and monsters. Some enemies wore masks of friendship. Some threats came from inside the Galactic Union itself. The Ashkari were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had helped found the Union thousands of years ago, and they still believed they should be in charge. When humanity arrived, rising quickly and winning the respect of other species, the Ashkari saw a threat to their power. They decided to destroy the humans' reputation. A human colony on the planet Korvath 4 was attacked. 47 colonists were killed, including 12 children. The attackers wore unmarked armor and left behind evidence pointing to local insurgent groups. The Ashkari diplomats expressed their sympathy and urged Earth to respond with overwhelming force. They expected humanity to retaliate wildly, killing innocents and proving that humans were the dangerous barbarians the Ashkari claimed they were. They would then demand sanctions, restrictions, perhaps even expulsion from the Union. But Earth did not send a fleet. Earth sent a single Special Forces team. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb led his squad through the jungles of Korvath 4, tracking the attackers to their base. He had been a soldier for 15 years, and something about this mission felt wrong. The evidence was too clean, the trail too obvious. When they finally reached the enemy camp, they found the truth. The attackers were not local insurgents. They were Ashkari covert operatives, wearing advanced technology and carrying Union credentials. They had killed those colonists and framed the locals, all to manipulate humanity into making a mistake. Marcus did not hesitate. He recorded everything with his helmet camera, transmitted the evidence to Earth Command, and then gave the order to attack. The fight was short and brutal. The Ashkari operatives were skilled, but they were not prepared for what hit them. Within 10 minutes, every one of them was dead. Marcus stood over the last body, his weapon still smoking. Earth Command, this is Webb. Mission complete. Evidence secured. No survivors. The diplomatic crisis that followed nearly tore the Union apart. The Ashkari denied everything, but the evidence was undeniable. For the first time in 1,000 years, a founding member species faced official punishment from the Council. Their trade privileges were suspended. Their military forces were restricted, but more importantly, the rest of the galaxy saw what the Ashkari had tried to do. They saw how close they had come to losing humanity's protection because of one species' jealousy. The Ashkari never forgave the humans. They retreated to their territory and began building their forces, planning for a future confrontation. But they had learned an important lesson. You could not trick the wolves. You could not manipulate them into destroying themselves. They were too smart, too careful, too patient. If you wanted to defeat humanity, you would have to do it openly. And that was something no one in the galaxy was willing to try. Back on Earth, the memorial wall grew longer. New names were added for those who had fallen on Korvath 4 and a dozen other worlds. Each name represented a life given in service to something greater. General Katie Reyes, now commanding the entire exoplanetary warfare division, visited the wall every month. She had trained many of the names, carved into the stone. She remembered their faces, their voices, their dreams. "We ask too much of them," her aide said once. Katie shook her head. "We ask what is necessary, and they give it freely. That is what makes them special." She touched one of the names, feeling the cold stone beneath her fingers. That is what makes them human. 50 years had passed since humanity first looked up and found they were not alone. In that time, The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Crix had been pushed back to a single system, contained by a permanent human garrison that watched their every move. The Thornax Syndicate had been dismantled, its leaders dead or imprisoned. A dozen minor wars had been prevented simply because human forces were nearby. The wolves had become the guardians of the galaxy, whether the galaxy wanted them or not. General Megan Torres stood at the window of her office on Luna Base, looking out at the blue and white sphere of Earth. She was 90 years old now, her hair completely silver, her face lined with decades of decisions that had cost lives and saved millions more. Alien medical technology kept her body strong, but nothing could ease the weight of memory. Behind her, the graduation ceremony was about to begin. 200 young men and women had completed the most difficult military training program ever created. They would become the next generation of humanity's special forces, carrying on the legacy that Torres and others had built. She turned away from the window and walked toward the assembly hall. The graduates stood in perfect rows, their uniforms crisp, their faces set with quiet determination. They had been tested in ways that would break most beings. They had faced simulated combat in zero gravity, survived weeks in hostile alien environments, and learned to fight enemies that their grandparents could not have imagined. They were ready. Torres took the podium and looked out at the young faces before her. She saw herself in them, saw the same fire that had driven her so many years ago. She also saw the faces of those who had come before and would never grow old. "When I was your age," she began, "we did not know what waited for us among the stars. We trained for threats we could imagine. Human threats. Earth-bound dangers. You have trained for something greater. You have prepared for threats beyond anything we could have dreamed." She paused, letting her words settle. "Some species in this galaxy believe we are monsters. They think our capacity for violence makes us dangerous and unpredictable. They are not entirely wrong. We are dangerous. We are capable of terrible things. But what makes us different from true monsters is choice. We choose when to be terrible, and against whom." In the audience, Colonel Chris Bennett watched the ceremony with pride. He had trained many of these graduates himself, pushed them to their limits and beyond. He had lost friends on 37 combat deployments across the galaxy. He knew better than most what these young soldiers were about to face. He also knew they were ready. Torres continued her speech, her voice growing stronger. "The galaxy did not know what to make of us at first. They saw our wars and called us primitive. They saw our warriors and called us barbaric. But now they call us when they are afraid. Now they call us when all hope seems lost. Because they have learned what we have always known. I'm undo that." She leaned forward, her eyes sweeping across the assembly. "There are worse things in the dark than humans, but not many." The graduates did not cheer or applaud. They simply stood straighter, their resolve hardening into something unbreakable. After the ceremony, Torres walked through the memorial building. The wall of names had grown so large that it now covered every surface of a structure built specifically to hold it. Thousands of names, each one a story, each one a sacrifice. She stopped before a section near the beginning, running her fingers over the carved letters. Cole Martinez, Lisa Dunn, Jake Simmons, Maria Reyes, Dan Perry, the heroes of Terrellian, the first Special Forces operators to prove what humanity could do. "We built something that will outlast us," she said quietly. "Ma'am?" Her aide had followed her inside. Torres turned to face him. "When I am gone, when everyone who remembers first contact is gone, they will still be here. The wolves. Protecting the galaxy from threats that have not even appeared yet. That is what we leave behind. Not medals or monuments, but people. People who will never stop fighting." That, far across the galaxy, new threats were stirring. On a dead world circling a dying star, something ancient was beginning to wake. It had slept for 1,000,000 years, waiting for the galaxy to grow fat and complacent. Waiting for the right moment to feed. Its sensors had detected the energy signatures of civilizations spread across 1,000 systems. It had calculated the resources available, the defenses in place, the likelihood of resistance. By every measure, the time to wake was now. But something else had appeared in its calculations. Something new. A species that had not existed when it went to sleep. A species that showed patterns of behavior unlike anything in its memory banks. The ancient thing studied the data on humanity with growing confusion. These creatures fought each other constantly, yet grew stronger because of it. They destroyed themselves in small ways to build themselves up in large ones. They were chaotic, illogical, and by every rational standard should have killed themselves long ago. Instead, they had become the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. The ancient thing paused its awakening sequence. It needed more information. It needed to understand these humans before it revealed itself. It was afraid. For the first time in a million years, it was afraid. Back on Luna Base, the new graduates received their assignments. Some would go to the Crix containment zone. Others would patrol the borders of known space, watching for threats from the darkness beyond. A few would be sent on missions so secret that their names would never appear on any record. One young soldier, a woman named Amy Grant, paused at the memorial wall before leaving for her first deployment. She touched the names of those who had gone before, feeling the weight of their sacrifice. "I will not let you down," she whispered. Then she walked toward the transport that would carry her to the stars, where dangers waited, and glory called, and death was always close. She was not afraid. She was a wolf, and the galaxy, for all its wonders and horrors, had no idea what was coming. Humanity had only shown a fraction of what they could do. They had fought criminals and insects and conspirators. They had proven themselves against every challenge the Union had thrown at them. But the real tests were still ahead. The ancient things waking in the dark. The threats from dimensions that should not exist. The enemies that would make the Crix look like children. The wolves were ready. They had always been ready, because that was the truth that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Humans did not train for the wars they expected. They trained for the wars they could imagine, and then they trained for the ones they could not. And when those wars came, as they always did, the wolves would be there, standing in the fire, holding the line, forever.